Shoplifters. Today I want to talk about the mentality, which is one of the most important things that I picked up from Ivan Duric, which is the guy who's basically squatting every day, and he's a big inspiration. And that mentality is that basically, I think that it wasn't his quote, okay? It was another guy in the comments, which actually got a lot of upvotes. And basically he said that the main thing that he liked about Ivan is that he thinks, I hope that I'm quoting exactly what he said. Basically he said something like, I like that Ivan thinks that every single fool in his comments has something that of value that can be shared to him. And if you understand this, it makes sense because people are basically, I'm sorry for this weird ass movement that I did with my face. I'm gonna cut it maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'll leave it in because it's fun. I was saying, understand that this guy has spent a lot of time under the bar, like real time, okay? And also he's researching all of this stuff by his own, by his own will. So he's an expert in squats, in squat anatomy, and how his body actually basically responds to different stimulus. He's his own scientist, okay? He tries stuff, and that is something amazing that I also am trying to do it to myself. So it's really hard to basically have one dude come in your comments. I think that this guy said like, dude, move your bar because you're keeping it too high on your neck or something like that. And it's hard to basically have a constructive mindset to a comment like that, because you understand that if I told that to you, you do know that you're not keeping the bar on your neck, but it's on your traps, okay? However, the real mentality of Ivan was, number one, that in that instance he wasn't really aggressive towards the guy. He just said, no, trust me, it's on my traps. Also, he responded to some other things that he said. And this is a really important mindset to get, because he really does think that every single guy has something of value that can be offered to him. It doesn't matter what their background is. And it's usually something that I really struggle with. I really struggle with this thing myself. I usually always want to have the last word on every single topic. I usually just say, I simply disregard a lot of stuff just because people lack the credentials to talk about that. However, it's an extremely toxic and wrong mindset, which I am trying to change, because it just doesn't make any sense, okay? Let's think about it logically. It's just, I studied a bit of psychology, but basically, if a people makes an argument and you aren't even bothered to reason with that people about that thing, and you're just saying, no, I know more than you, or I am a scientist, I don't know, I train much more than you, I have more time under the bar, whatever, you are basically just making a call to authority, which basically means I am more qualified, therefore I do not need to even reason with you. But it is an extremely toxic mindset, one, because you're not even reasoning on something that can and will have value, because I assure you that either way, everything is gonna have value added to your life. And the second thing is that you're just disregarding someone just because of your credentials or someone else's credential. A common trend actually on YouTube is the stuff that people basically say, oh yeah, I tried doing this thing and it worked for me. And another guy comes and says, no, it won't work. The guy then explains, yeah, it worked for me, I did this and that. And then this guy basically copy-pastes a study which says that what the guy number one is doing doesn't work. And he simply leaves. And that is extremely stupid, because number one, understand that studies can prove pretty much everything, which is also why it's kind of hard to basically be fair with, number one, the interpretation, number two, which data people, media, or whatever are basically feeding us. So it's really hard to understand that. However, I also understand that if one person doesn't even want to argue with that, with someone that actually has anecdotal experience with something and just posts a study and says, no, that doesn't work, that's dumb, we don't care. That is extremely toxic and bad, because it won't give anything of value for any of them. One dude, because they didn't even try to argue, just copy-pasted a study of which he didn't understand anything, because the majority of people, me included, do not understand anything of studies. Even just learning how to interpret and understand the study is something that takes hours of hours of hours. So science is and studies in general are really hard to understand, but anecdotal experiences of people are also extremely valuable. Do not disregard them. And that also is paradoxical, because whenever I talk with people about some other stuff, I always tell them, yeah, but your anecdote doesn't make any sense. It doesn't really value in the grand scheme of things. However, both things hold value in a different way, because especially in lifting, okay, I'm not talking about maybe statistics and basically, let's say, things that concern the health of people in the current era, okay? Understand that anecdotal experience at that moment doesn't really make any sense, because you could tell me that everybody you know basically felt bad because of the pandemic, and I can just tell you that all of the people that I knew actually took the jab and had no problem whatsoever. However, you are gonna think that the jab is evil, I'm gonna think that the jab is perfectly normal. But I don't really want to talk about that. It was just to give you an example that I had last time, and I told him both our anecdotes doesn't really make any sense and it doesn't give any value to the whole situation. However, in lifting, it's really different, because the mechanics are different for every single person. As we know, we need to program regarding and based on how we work. Some people respond better to strength work, some people to more volume, and it depends both on physical attributes as well as mental attributes, and in general the style of training you prefer. So always try what other people are basically saying that it might be something good for you. And that is a mentality that you need to basically get, because if you get a lot of input from other people and you just disregard everything, it doesn't make any sense. I agree that you also cannot try every single thing, because that will need an infinite amount of time. Because if one guy says do 40 pull-ups a day and the other guy says do 1 pull-ups a week, you can't do both, and you also might end up losing progress. So you need to have a base of knowledge in order to discern the people who are just talking by their ass, or people who actually might have a point on something and it could make sense. For instance, Ivan's idea of using heavy pin squats, which basically aren't completely squats. You basically have your bar pinned, so you aren't in a completely erect position, but you are almost at the end of it. So he basically does these partial squats with like 270 kilograms, 280 kilograms. And that, number one, primes his body and his brain, because he feels overloaded, okay, with a super amount of weight that he cannot hold in any other way, okay. However, with the pin squats he can. So when he goes under the bar and he squats 200, 210, that will feel lighter, and that is genius in my opinion, and it makes a lot of sense, okay? Because if I usually have this feeling whenever I do my weighted pull-ups and I fail with the weight, I remove the weight and I feel like a feather. So imagine how would you feel if you were rested in between sets. So that makes sense, and that is something interesting that he tried. I don't know if he thought about it or if someone suggested it to him. However, you need to have this kind of growth mindset in which you try to understand everything people are trying to tell you, try to apply it, see if that works for you. If not, move on. But in general, in life, that is a mindset that it is extremely important to have. I can give you an example. I am very good at memorizing stuff, and I have a quote-unquote game that I play by myself, okay? So let's say that I have a list of objects, okay? We have, for instance, letters and numbers, okay? And letter A corresponds to number 3, letter B corresponds to number 6, and there is a whole list. How do I memorize this? I basically start and I cover everything, okay? And then I move the paper down. I read, and there is A2. I cover it, I tell A2, I check it out, okay, it's correct. What's next? B3, no, it was B4, I'm gonna restart. And I keep restarting until I don't get everything okay. And once I hit 3 times in a row, everything correct, then I do it from the bottom up. And I swear that works amazingly. If you struggle to memorize things, try this thing out. Do not say, oh, it's dumb, oh, it's stupid, oh, it will take so long. No, it won't. It's gonna be a fun game. To me, it is a fun game, so that works for me. So you might try this and you will be like, whoa, this worked amazingly. I'm now very good at memorizing things, because it turns a boring activity into an association game, okay? And for me, it becomes just very, very easy. It was extremely useful, for instance, for my history classes, because there were a lot of dates that you need to remember associated with something. Of course, you need to know also this something, and you need to talk about this thing, so you need to know what there is. However, once you make the association between the date and what happens, at least you have a chronological timeline. So check it out, try it, and understand that you can get a lot of this input from everybody, okay? And you need to both learn to listen to people, and you also need to extrapolate it by yourself. For instance, all of the movements that I'm doing, all of the behind the neck presses with lighter weight, all of this stuff is all basically stolen from what Chinese weightlifters are doing for their mobility. It's all of the stuff that I'm basically stealing from them, watching them repeating these movements. And perhaps that might not work for me, but some things do work. Let's make another example, okay? The foam rolling and the whole fascia thing, okay? Basically, you will see in the video of Sunday, you will notice that I was basically trying to do my squat 3 steps approach, and I tried my best to keep the bar as straight as I could, and it was a struggle at first. Then I used my lacrosse ball on my left back, and everything after that went much more smoothly, because there is an association for me between basically decompressing or releasing the fascia of my left back and the mobility that it grants to my left shoulder. So I know that I need to do that before the squat, so that might be something that works for you. And that is the same for all of this, let's say, self-fix stuff, okay? Like, you know, the banded joint mobilization and all of the stuff. It's all stuff that you need to try. But don't just look at a video and say, okay, it didn't work, I'm doomed, it's not gonna work. Because that mentality is self-defeating. And also, look at the comments, look at what people are doing, learn from their experiences. If somebody shares a story of how they did it, try to do what they did, because it might also work for you. So understand that this kind of growth mentality is something that is going to help you a lot, and it's going to give you more opportunities. And then I reached to the other point, because we talked about what happens if the other person or the things that you're looking at is correct and works for you. But what if it doesn't? Number one, you know that it doesn't, so you're already limiting the stuff that you need to try. And number two, if you're actually talking with someone and you talk with him about this stuff, you both get more knowledgeable. I had an argument with a friend of mine in which basically he told me that after he deadlifts, he does something like this with his shoulders in order to basically engage more his traps. And we basically discussed about it. Then I told him, well, you know, the idea is okay, you know, to do a kind of a shrug, but don't shrug and also pull back, because that is gonna basically put your spine in a bad position since you're holding up to such a weight. So I talked to him, because he gave me his idea about basically doing this weird movement which makes sense but not in the deadlift. So I talked to him about it and told him, yeah, that is good, you know, you're also basically training your traps and your rear delts and all of the upper back musculature in this movement. However, know that it puts your spine at a risk, so perhaps we can do this movement, but we're gonna need to separate it. So we can perhaps do our deadlifts and do that in another movement. So I taught him something, and I also gained something back, because that is a movement that I never really thought about. I always thought about either shrugging or moving like I do my rear delt work, okay, in which I basically mainly use my rear delts and also some of the rest of the back musculature. But I never thought about doing both. And maybe it does make sense to do it from a position of the rower, okay? Because in that position we are bent over. So in this way we can use pretty much both in the most effective position. So that can be a shrug variation that you can implement and that we have just invented, okay? But we're gonna need to try, we're gonna see if it feels comfortable and so on. But we both gain something. He's hopefully not gonna injure his back, and I might have a new exercise that I will try one day. And again, if what the other guy is completely wrong and you're explaining it to him, understand that teaching is the first form of self-understanding of the concept. A friend of mine one time told me, if you cannot explain a concept clearly, it means that you didn't understand it. And I hold true to these words, but for certain topics, meaning that some exercises are very hard to explain with words, but are way easier to show with your body. So, and I believe that showing the concept can be both through the language and through your movements, your body in general. So, hopefully this video will be useful to you. It was a really interesting discussion in my opinion. and I'll see you guys in the next one.